certain way people that kill people behave. And there's certain things you look for. It's not all telltale, but sometimes you just get a feeling. Running from the police from a murder. When they finally get arrested, they're brought down to the homicide office and they get stuck in the box, which is the interview room. They have a tendency to kind of just ball up and just feel like they're done. It's a sense of relief. And he's crying, or she is crying.
What are you doing, man?
The emotion is spilling out of him.
I'm their killer.
You might need to give that thing another look.
You put me in the box and I know I didn't do anything, I'm banging on the door one time.
Hello guys, welcome to Chasing a Murder, talking news right now. I need you guys to subscribe and like right now so you don't forget. Also, hit that notification bell that will actually notify you whenever we have new uploads or if I have community posts. We're on part 5 of the connecting the dots that has to do with the Lori Vallow case. Now we're going to kind of hop back and forth a little bit at the beginning of this, and this is because we're going to recap, plus I'm going to add new information. It's really hard to put this in great detail when you're always getting new information on this case. It comes out almost nearly every day, over 6 months, guys. This case is loaded with information. Let's not forget the preliminary hearing for Chad Daybell just happened, and we know that Lori actually decided that she would go straight to trial and skip her preliminary hearing. A lot of people are speculating as to why she did this. A lot of people believe that she was waiting to see how Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing went first. Didn't go so well. So now what I'm hearing is they are pushing for a jury trial. So jumping back to where we left off. So we did learn that Lori and Chad got married November 5th, just a few weeks after Tammy passes away. That's not a very good sign. That it says a lot of things that we'll hear about as this case moves forward, right? We also learned that Melanie Boudreaux had actually rode in a car with her uncle, which we know what her uncle has done, at least assumed and speculated to have been involved in. As far as Charles, we know for a fact he attacked Joseph Ryan because he said so. And now we're kind of speculating what happened to the children and wondering if he's involved. So now Alex Cox is with his niece at their brother-in-law's, I'm sorry guys, brother-in-law's. It's his brother-in-law's parents' house. And they have Brandon and Melanie's children at the house. She attempts to try to get those children from the parents, but they're able to call the police. She gets arrested and she's out within a few hours. Now this happened around November 14th, guys. That date's a little bit sketchy as well. There's actually 2 incidents, but there's something else that come out of this that I wanted to cover. And that's where Brandon Boudreaux actually had a lawsuit against Melanie's lawyer because of the very concerning accusations they threw out there about him. Now we also learned that around November 8th, Kay Woodcock had collected Charles Vallow's printer. I've heard at times also his PC after his passing. There she's able to collect some evidence that really helped police kind of draw a picture of what Lori's motive might be. And of course they find on there a ring that she had purchased through Amazon on Charles' Amazon account, along with a wedding dress and some beach attire for a man. From there, she informs police, and police are able to get a hold of the information in their own way. According to Kay, Charles' sister, she said at that time she really didn't realize Chad and Lori had married in Hawaii, but through the research, the search history, she saw these purchases, kind of put 2 and 2 together. And she mentions, basically this is where Lori Vallow made a huge mistake. Lori was short-sighted to think that emails, etc. were not traceable, says Kay. She says, quote, she didn't even get that kind of stuff, end quote. So while Kay's going through everything that Charles has and the things that she's learning, not only through the PC, but she's learning stuff through Brandon Boudreaux. She's learning that Lori's religion that she's involved in might even be a cult. On an interview, Kay said, quote, she had heard about the light and dark spirits and mentioned, I could not explain it back to you if I tried, end quote. Early November, detectives were asked to look into the vehicle involved in the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. They are asked to go to the suspect's home, Lori Daybell, to find it. The vehicle is confiscated, taken into police custody, and shortly after that, police start intermittent surveillance. But one thing I've noticed, if that's the case, there's not been any evidence showing proof that they were actually had any kind of surveillance on them at that time. Now, I don't remember if I stuck this in on part 4, but it's important, so I'm going to stick it in here just to be sure. It's just a quick little entry. So we know later, after I started making these connecting the dot videos, that Janice Cox, which is Lori Vallow's mother, claims that she actually talked on the phone October 1st with her grandson, JJ Vallow. So I want to throw that in here as well. Now, at this time, let me tell you, Lori Vallow's family, they're not able to really get in contact with Lori. In fact, Janice is actually trying to get contact of her daughter through Lori Vallow's friends. She even contacts a few friends in Hawaii. So Lori Vallow has pretty much shut out everybody in her life. She thinks most of her family is against her at this point. Now, remember the cheap shots that Melanie Boudreaux takes at her ex-husband after leaving him? Well, I think it happened back in June of 2019. It says that Melanie takes cheap shots at Brandon through her attorney. And in May of 2020, you can find some of the court records online or a few other places where they actually show where they battle back and forth pretty seriously over the custody of the children. And Brandon is fighting with everything that he has to protect himself and his children because his life had already been threatened. Between the time of November up until May, which we'll go into greater detail when we get there, there are emergency temporary orders. There's all kinds of orders going on for the children involved with this case that belong to Brandon and Melanie. Okay, so what did Melanie's attorney say about Brandon? Quote, Brandon Boudreaux has a history of victimizing women, which is probably an extension of his use of extreme dark pornography, end quote, says the attorney Garrett Smith at the time. He continues with, quote, Melanie confronted Brandon in June of last year with the proof of his pornography addiction and homosexual affairs. Brandon Boudreaux retaliated with threats to attack her and take her kids away. He has to carry through with his threats by lying in his court documents. Sadly and irresponsibly, much of the media has quoted Brandon Boudreaux biased, vindictive, and fake accusations as fact and truth when they are resentful, vengeful, dishonest in efforts to get full custody of Melanie's children. Brandon Boudreaux deceptively took Melanie's children out of state and kept them unlawfully. Melanie was the stable parent in the children's lives, while Brandon Boudreaux traveled for weeks and was rarely home. So Brandon Boudreaux, who has just had his life threatened, he's in hiding, he's going through a devastating divorce that comes suddenly. He probably still loves her in some way at this point. is now being trashed through the media. Brandon Boudreaux ends up challenging these accusations and putting up a lawsuit against Melanie Boudreaux's attorney for such slanderous and what he calls lies. And the mad accusations against Brandon Boudreaux does not stop there. It says Brandon Boudreaux has failed to tell investigators that his family has covered up child molestation, drug addiction, kidnapping, assaults, and even killings. Also, according to inside family information, Brandon Boudreaux's family is involved in organized crime, end quote. The attorney states that Brandon has plenty to hide. A closer look would reveal many possible sources of who would take a shot at him. He says that shot is a reference to the bullet that narrowly missed the father of 4 back in October. While Melanie was represented by several attorneys, one of them being Jarvis, especially during her and Brandon's continuous custody battle, the final results of that I know of right now, and I've had to neglect it lately, is that Brandon Boudreaux was awarded custody of the children. I think that's a good outcome, especially for the kids, considering what we know right now. The defamation lawsuit, which was first obtained by Justin Lum, guys, was filed in response to a release sent by Jarvis back in February. So all of this stuff was released in February. But finding the right place to put everything that's happening, it's a little bit difficult because it actually kind of started in this time frame. Interestingly, Jarvis, the attorney representing Melanie Boudreaux at the time, is also representing Lori Vallow's mother, Janice Cox, and her sister, Summer. And at this time, on this case, both of them are very much supporting Lori Vallow, even though they've not even had a chance to talk with her personally. Not only that, both Summer and Janice, neither, have seen or heard from Tylee, but claim, one of them, at least Janice, like I mentioned earlier, claimed to have spoken to JJ October 1st of 2019. So why is Brandon and Melanie's divorce so important? It's important because these are the documents where Brandon shares that information, especially the information about the missing children becoming possessed by zombies. And since they were possessed by zombies, they needed to die, in which we'll speak on again shortly here. According to Melanie Gibb, Lori Vallow felt very uncomfortable with the term zombie, but that doesn't seem to be true. Melanie says that she could tell that Lori had never heard that word before. And like we've said before, Melanie overheard Lori and Chad talking about Tylee being a zombie and JJ being a zombie, as well as Charles being a zombie. Melanie Gibb says that she's not real familiar with the term zombie, but is able to use it quite easily and knows exactly where to put that word and the use of that word. I guess she could have be telling the truth, but we just don't know because some of her testimony is a bit sketchy. One thing Melanie says about Chad Daybell's gift as a visionary, she claims later on that he is manipulating his gift. According to Chad, he says that his veil is open 24/7. This is due to his allegedly near-death experiences, 2 of them in fact. And at this time, Melanie Gibb believes beyond a doubt that Chad has this visionary gift and that he has the influence on people who trust in these visionary dream or revelations. She even believes that he has a connection with God that some people don't. So Chad Daybell, this He's a Mormon, visionary, a fictional author of this religion. Also believes in things like he's able to make a portal, and that this portal is very powerful, guys, and used to make very serious revelations. He often used this portal to communicate with people that were, many miles away from him, as well as to contact all the dark spirits in the world, where he would make a prayer, kind of praying that they die off. I'm not quite certain how to word that. His portal was used to locate all these dark spirits, like I mentioned, and all the new zombies. So Lori Vallow has all these crazy things happening, but according to Lori, her reason for this is that Satan is after her. She says that Satan is after her more than most because of her ranking within the cult-like group. She says the level that she is exhausted to makes her a target to Satan. And again, Chad is using his portal at this point to update the numbers of zombies here on Earth. Chad has predictions, and most of them are wrong. But the way that he deals with it is he's quick to sway the blame to agency, a great tactic for a great manipulator. We are learning a lot about Chad and Lori at this point, but at this time, people are they're not able to understand that they have this evil plot and that they're capable of doing such horrendous things. And this is because of the way that they hold themselves, the way that they speak, and how they interact with people. What's interesting, and we don't know at the time that they're doing it, is when they speak to police about incidents that's happening or other people, they're kind of telling the truth, but it's kind of like opposite day. So for one example, after Lori's husband Charles passes away, Lori tells her friend Melanie Charles was on his way to kill her for the insurance money, and that she had this $3 million over her head. And I've not had time to find out if her insurance policy was still active at that time, but we know it's not any longer. The truth is, Lori is kind of using what's in her mind and her thoughts and applying them to her, when in reality, she's talking about Charles' insurance money and how basically it just seems, now this is speculation, and we suspect that she had interest in Charles passing away. So it was basically something hanging over his head instead. But when that money went to Kay, it totally screwed up her plans. And that's the way the majority of people following this case feels. So what it seems like, according to everything, you see the way that they're handling things and how they're acting, it's almost like a religious mafia group. And if you're marked a zombie, then most likely you could have been next to die. This must be very scary to be marked a zombie if you're around everything that's happening. Especially at this point for Kay Woodcock, she was marked a zombie. Now, according to rumors going around, this group was trying to gain access to all these life insurance policies in order to support their group agenda. And a lot of people are finding it very hard to believe that Alex Cox was capable of doing such things, because personally meeting him, he was just this very happy, easygoing, fun guy. It's hard to believe that somebody like him would believe in zombies, but according to Melanie Gibb, she said she had no doubt Alex Cox believes in everything Lori tells him. She also says that he would do whatever he could to protect her. So you guys need to remember this for the new information coming up in this video. So I was able to obtain a lot of what Melanie Gibb said through Nate Eaton's news interview with Melanie. But since then, that video has been extremely edited. It no longer has all the information it once had on it. So if you go back and watch it, you'll notice there's a lot of things that's missing. You can also tell by the bad edits. They're worse than mine, guys. That's not good. And I have to apologize. Today's very noisy. It doesn't matter where I go, guys. So sorry. So one of those parts is where Nate asks Melanie or suggests Chad seems to be the one making all the calls. In the video, I was able to catch and see that part where Melanie says, yes, he was the guy telling Lori to do everything, and Lori would call everyone else. So even though that no longer exists on that video, I'm able to give it to you and show you that the truth of what Melanie Gibb believes Chad's part in all this is. I wanted to be sure that everybody understood Chad Daybell's role in this crazy story. So now that we've done our 20-minute recap and add new information, around November 19th of 2019, about a week before conducting the welfare check on JJ and Tylee, the police officer, they come to, I'm going to call her SB, which is a neighbor's door, asking questions about Lori and her children. She lived in the same townhome complex as Lori Vallow at the time. This neighbor had actually helped Lori move into her Rexburg townhouse with the children back in September of 2019. Tylee's birthday was September 24th of 2019, and Summer says that she had actually texted with Tylee at that time, so that's important. This is new information. Summer says she really has no way to know if it's her. Now, Summer and Lori Vallow's mother actually had an interview way later after all this, and they give us a glimpse into who Lori was. And her family says that Lori made bad choices in the past. They say that she made mistakes, but they never could see her being what media portrayed. They say, we know Lori. They continue with, Lori takes responsibility for herself. She took on JJ. He was born addicted to drugs. He only weighed like 1 pound and 9 ounces at the time. Lori was dedicated to JJ from the moment he come home. And they also believe that everything that's about to happen right now, Lori has reasons for doing what she's doing. Like everyone else in the story, they say that Kay threatened Lori and that she had done this through a few different ways. They also say that Kay could have made a better choice of how she handled this, and that she could, file some legal papers and things like that in order to take better care of JJ. It's around mid-October, and Chad and Lori returned back to her townhome in Rexburg, Idaho, after, their small private eloping marriage in Hawaii. But remember when I told you guys that they were supposedly already married at the temple, but behind the clergy's back, basically. This is while Tammy was still alive. According to a few friends of theirs, Melanie Gibb and a few of them, they say that Jason Mao played a part in their connection and their matrimony. Not only him, they were also supported by spirits that were behind the veil. Sadly, it seemed that many people were aware of this sealing, except for Tammy. But as of right now, I've never found solid proof that Jason Mao ever sealed them in the temple. When Lori and Chad arrive back home, they start back on their normal lives. JJ's there in her life. Melanie Boudreaux is living right beside her. Her brothers got an apartment not too far away. But what's interesting is what we're hearing is Alex Cox doesn't have any furniture in that unit that he's living in. And they believe that Tylee and JJ each had a room in Lori's townhome. But Tylee hasn't been seen. And JJ's running around playing with neighbors. Lori actually gets in contact with a few of her friends once she returns and makes plans to do a podcast. And there's a religious event that's happening not too far. It's about a week away. So Melanie Gibb, her boyfriend, Warwick, plan a trip to go stay with Lori at her townhome and attend this event and make a podcast together. Several of the firstborn group, this preppers group, including Jason Mao, they're always doing podcasts together, and they've done many. In fact, Jason Mao today is claiming that he hardly knew Chad or Lori. That is strange since they were on his podcast multiple times. And when Chad and Lori return and they start continuing with their life, pushing, Jesus Christ's second coming, preparing the people, the 144,000, they seem to be blissfully very unaware just how deep in the mud they are walking. Lori has new ideas for her life, and it's a complete 360 of who she was before she met Chad Daybell. Before she met Chad Daybell, she was 100% mom, is what we're hearing. She was there for her children mostly, and her husband, Charles Vallow, at the time. But now, she's making these plans, now that she's dating an author that she seems to be very proud about. She plans to start writing books herself. She's also getting more and more into the podcast. In fact, they even have 7 things that they said that they need to accomplish before the summer of 2020. And if you remember, the one witness that was on the plane with Chad mentioned that Chad was changing his directions and his writing. And you guys will have to forgive me if this video is a bit sloppy, because it's been very difficult being able to finish this. Now, at this time, we're hearing that Chad Daybell is actually living with Lori in that townhouse for a period of time. And after Tammy's death, Chad Daybell has a few times that he's in contact with Tammy's family. I don't know where this fits in the timeline, but he actually had told his late wife's sister that a little more information about his new wife, and told him that Lori had no children, and that Lori Vallow described herself as to the Daybell's parents in November. It was in November, there we go, as an empty nester. And at this time, we know that Tylee nor JJ have a living father. Lori Vallow has 100% guardianship over both children. Also during this time frame, Kay and Larry continue to try to get a hold of JJ, including reaching out to the school on Grandparents' Day, but they don't have any luck. At this point, Kay and Larry are starting to really worry. They're worried about the safety of their grandson. Again, the grandparents didn't know about Lori's new husband, nor did they know that Lori had moved to Rexburg, Idaho. Kay is starting to have difficulty sleeping, with no contact from Lori or JJ in months. So we know back on November 8th that Kay Woodcock actually had Charles Vallow's electric devices. She's finding out this stuff. And in mid-November, somewhere in this time frame, this is where Kay actually makes contact with police about what she's finding on that printer, like I mentioned. But guess what? They can't get a hold of JJ. This is very concerning. They have no idea that Tylee hasn't been seen at this time. And at this point, they're starting to work up and ask police to assist them with doing a welfare check for JJ. This takes a while for them to put the paperwork together and finally decide that maybe the Woodcocks are correct, and they need to do a welfare check for JJ. We may skip a bit here, and like I said, it's hard to put the story together in order. Around November 20th, this is when Melanie says that she actually meets Ian Powaski. Ian is a recently divorced young man. He has 2 children, and I'm not going to say her name right now. So Ian was married to this young lady for a period of time. For some reason, they ended up in a divorce. She leaves him, and Ian, he gets lonely at some point, and he joins some of the dating sites, and I believe one of them is connected to the Mormons. So there, supposedly, he and Melanie Boudreaux meet, and almost immediately he feels very comfortable with Melanie. They're talking about her religion. This is like a #1 topic in her life. And Ian actually takes her out on a date after texting her. They have a good time, they connect, and at some point Melanie meets Ian's children. Ian says that the fact that Melanie was able to be close with her children and that she was pretty good with the children made him fall in love with her very fast. And what they didn't realize, according to an interview that they did later, was that they lived across the street from one another the whole time that they were speaking online. Ian ends up staying at Melanie's townhome quite often while continuing to have his own place, and he brings his children over and they spend the night and spend time with Melanie Boudreaux as well. One thing you must remember is that Ian Powaski, he's kind of had difficulties reaching his goals in life, including college, whereas his ex-wife is still struggling to raise her children and make it through college. She really has her goals set, and she's determined to meet those. At this time, this is where things really start to catch, or fuel the fire. Melanie Boudreaux introduces Ian to Chad Daybell and his new wife, Lori Daybell. They share their religious ideas and share how Chad has these amazing gifts and visions. They also share the fact that he's a book writer, and at some point teaches him about portals. According to some of Ian's writings, which we're going to go over shortly, he seems to be quite enthralled by these new ideas, especially since he's big on gaming. He even compares it to an RPG or something like a Dungeons and Dragons. Not to say it is like Dungeons and Dragons, but he's trying to describe how he sees these beliefs that they're teaching. In later videos, Melanie Boudreaux, Lori Vallow Daybell's niece, has just settled into her new townhomes, which is next to her aunt and uncle, who are following this new religious group with strange beliefs. And now they have a lot of strange events happening around them, and people are starting to catch on to this, and are also learning that this group is actually preparing for Jesus Christ's second coming. It wasn't long ago that Melanie Boudreaux herself was arrested for attempting to steal her kids from Brandon's parents' home. She had just gotten out of jail, and Melanie Boudreaux seems to be pretty open, except for certain things that she's trying to hide. She's dating a new man who has children, and at this point, investigators are starting to suspect whether or not she had a role to play in the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux, her ex-husband. According to Melanie, a few weeks after she had been there, she was just looking through these dating sites where she finds this newly divorced man with 2 kids. She finds out he's a Mormon. How perfect for her. Okay, I have collected a lot in this case, but because there's so much in life and everything else, I don't have editors or helpers or assistants. It's hard to put it all together, so I might have to kind of throw back and forth and maybe even repeat some things. But we know that Ian Powaski has some documents that come out later, those of us that are following this story pretty close. But what we're learning is Ian is actually learning these new ideas right away from the start, as he's stating, Melanie, and he starts to write about all of these things that are happening around him on his computer. But what we're about to share is some of that stuff, but it's not really discovered until February of 2020, at least to the public. And it's discovered by Ian's wife or ex-wife. But Ian absolutely knows way more than he leads the public to believe in his later interviews. And he absolutely seems to find these new ideas fun and interesting, like I said earlier. It isn't like I'm putting words in his mouth, because this is what he writes. Quote, "There were fun and exciting ideas, but I felt like many of them were ripped straight out of the Dungeons and Dragons manual," end quote. The document actually even included stats on which a person was ranked by his or her levels of vibration, libido, trustworthiness, light, and dark percentage. What he doesn't realize is he's based on, his loyalty to them and how trustworthy he is as far as hiding what they want hidden. Also, in his written document, he talks about zombies and what they are. He says that zombies are human bodies that have had their original spirits forced from them and have been possessed by either a demon, which is described in pretty good detail here. He puts in parentheses, original third of the heavenly host who followed Lucifer. He says that it's a disembodied spirit, in parentheses, once living human spirits who have chosen not to be reborn in another probation. They are in the form of sometimes of a worm or a slug, which is a creature controlled by Lucifer that enters the body to control the host. So clearly, if they're talking about zombies, then they must be saying who they believe are zombies. But Ian doesn't really have anything put in writing naming anybody as a zombie right now. Ian's learning pretty quickly that whoever's not on their side is dark. And that's because in the writings attributed to Powaski's claim, there were 50 dark translated beings in the world. And 2 of them were police officers. The very same officers who are concerned for the welfare of the children. How Ian's not able to put this puzzle together pretty easily, it's because he doesn't want to. It seems to me, in my opinion, that Ian is so intrigued by this new idea. And like everything else, his gaming has led his life. And so, of course, this is going to lead him astray from the path he should be on. So now that we have established that Ian is well aware of everything that this group is teaching, pretty much, we're moving on to November 21st. On November 21st of 2019, Lori's account or electronic device has logged into a classroom communication app from JJ's former school, the Life Academy in Arizona. According to what investigators find out, is Lori's user account is shown to be having viewed a post made by the school. That was collected by Fox 10. So this is important, guys, because where we're moving forward, JJ didn't show up for school on September 23rd. And Lori Daybell had actually told the school in Rexburg, the 24th, that he would be staying with his grandparents in Louisiana and wouldn't be back until October. So to me, in my opinion, Lori's actions at this point played a huge role to get the school a little bit more involved with her plan. In reality, Lori has mentioned multiple times, especially to Charles, that nobody cares. So why not? she believes that no one cares enough about the people in her life to keep a close eye on them. But she will find out that idea is very wrong. But her niece, Melanie Boudreau, is living there. She's dating Ian, so she is a little preoccupied with Ian a bit, but she does see Lori and Chad. But Melanie claims she never sees either JJ or Tylee. According to Melanie, she says she never sees her own kids and never questioned where Lori's were. She was there to get a fresh start, nothing more. But interestingly, Melanie Boudreau is getting a very close partnership, friendship with her uncle Alex, who she didn't know most of her life. According to Melanie, her and her uncle Alex are spending a lot of time together daily up until Ian comes into her life, but she still sees Alex often. At this point, Alex Cox seems to be the puppet for Lori, and now even Chad, because he is actually seems to have made a friendship with Chad Daybell and has even been over to his home. He had been actually traced going to Chad Daybell's home when Chad Daybell's wife Tammy Daybell was still alive. But nobody has reasons except for a few things we'll talk about later as to why Alex and Chad Daybell seem to have a pretty decent relationship. Looking back in Lori Vallow's past, where she's been married to Joseph Ryan Charles Vallow, it didn't seem that Alex Cox had a relationship with them like he does with Chad Daybell. But I continue to look for more evidence to find out more on that. One thing I did notice, and I think most people have, is that Alex, Chad, Lori, Melanie, including Ian at this point, all feel comfortable enough to speak openly about all these kind of questionable acts and beliefs. And let's not forget about Melanie Gibb. She, to a point that we know of, is also involved with these very strange teachings. Even her husband, boyfriend, Melanie Gibb's boyfriend, David Warwick, is somewhat supportive, but as far as I can tell in my research, he's not really 100% in with this group like Melanie Gibb is. Now, some of you guys have this timeline down pretty wrong. I'm going to put this here because I'm not certain if this fits here or not, but on November 24th of 2019, around 1:16 to 1:20 p.m., Lori and a man believed to be Chad is seen on security camera in a car visiting Lori's Rexburg storage unit for about 4 minutes. They remove items and also place new items into the unit. This is the last visit to the storage unit by Lori and any other men associated with Lori. This information comes from East Idaho News. According to investigators, inside the storage was tons of JJ's and Tylee's items. This includes clothes, bikes, skates, and even family pictures, but no sign of the kids anywhere. Now remember, Melanie Gibb says that she believes her friend Lori, sister-like friend, has sent JJ to be with his grandparents in Louisiana. So, November 25th of 2019, Rexburg police, contacted by Gilbert police after JJ's grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, requested a welfare check. This is according to an affidavit of probable cause. Kay Woodcock knew what her brother had gone through. It was a horrifying end. And now that the school is not really cooperating so much, and everything just seems to be piling up on the negative side. She's absolutely terrified that something is incredibly wrong. So, they launched the investigation, which led them to the apartment complex where Lori, Chad Daybell, and Lori's niece, Melanie Boudreau, all lived in Rexburg, Idaho. When the investigator arrives on scene, he had written in his affidavit that he was aware that Lori Vallow moved to Rexburg with JJ near the first week of September of 2019. And he says that he's aware that JJ was enrolled for 3 weeks at Kennedy Elementary School. He mentions that in Rexburg, Idaho, he was further aware that JJ was seen by neighbors at and near his apartment in Rexburg during that time of the month. You can imagine at this point, Kay must be sitting at the edge of her seat because she has been busy trying to keep tabs on JJ, and Lori refuses to let her speak to JJ, her own grandson. Kay and Larry actually start to fear the worst for JJ at this time, and later even Tylee, but they can only legally pursue at this time a welfare check. This is all stemming from the fact that Charles said that he was afraid for the children's safety before he died, and Kay is well aware of just how off the charts Lori's mind was, and how it was expanding from the reality of life. To Kay and to other people who were starting to understand just how sick Lori had become, it seems that Lori is treating lives like they grow on trees, and that they suspected her idea of endless lives were fed by her new husband, Chad Daybell. After all, when Chad first met her, she claimed that he and Lori Vallow had actually been married multiple times in past lives, and even had JJ as a son in one of their past lives. But Kay Woodcock is struggling to understand their beliefs. She doesn't understand them that well, but she knew well enough that she might be running out of time, and so did Brandon. The police they claim that they're watching Lori intermittently here, but really there's no evidence of that. It's not available to us anyways. Around this time that they're doing the welfare check, it's just a few days before Thanksgiving. And November 25th, by that afternoon, the Rexburg police have made plans to go out and visit Lori the next day to check on JJ. November 26, 2019, first contact. This is the day that marks the biggest turning point in the case out of all turning points. Based on a later testimony and the preliminary hearing, which happened in 2020, Detective Rans Harmacio, and forgive me if I don't say their names right, who is a detective for the Rexburg police. He's been there 19 years. He's the one that's asked to perform a welfare check on JJ. He's also the one that had seized the Jeep early November that police had a big interest in and suspected it might have been part of the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. Homicidio at the time didn't know JJ or Tylee very well at that moment, but he later learned, who they were very well through hundreds of photos and videos that were online, and then of course he's had some sent to him. So, approaching November 26, the detectives make their way to Lori Vallow's Rexburg townhome. They knock on the door, where they are greeted by Alex and Chad. The detective asks him, "Is JJ home?" The detective then informs him that they're there to perform a welfare check on JJ. He asks him again if he is home. At that point, according to the detective, Alex looks at Chad Daybell, which is Lori's new husband, and he didn't answer him. The detective says again, "Is JJ home?" Alex Cox, Lori's brother, finally responds with, "He's with his grandma in Louisiana." It's at that point that the detective realizes something isn't right, and this is because he informs Alex that this is unlikely because Kay is the one that originally called for this welfare check. The detective then says, "How can I get a hold of Lori? Can I get her phone number?" Alex tells the detective that he doesn't have it, which is kind of strange since he's in contact with her quite often, and that's her brother. This immediately tipped the detective, made him think that his response was suspicious. Just based on that fact alone, he thought they had been close based off his initial investigation. At the preliminary hearing that's later on, way after this, the detective said that he then asked Alex, "Where can I find Lori so I can contact her?" And Alex tells the detective that she's in apartment 107. The detectives make their way over to apartment 107 and try to contact Lori. Detective Dave Hope goes to knock on a door, and as he approaches the unit 107 and begins knocking, the other detective sees a black vehicle approaching. The detective noticed that it's Lori Vallow's husband, Chad Daybell, that's actually driving this vehicle, and it appears that the vehicle is trying to drive away. The detective actually stopped the vehicle and starts to speak with him. The detective asks Chad, "When was the last time you saw JJ?" Chad Daybell said, "I last seen JJ in the apartment 107 in October." During this time, according to detectives, they are not sure who lives in what apartment, especially in apartment 107. But one thing's certain, it isn't Lori. And I think they come to that conclusion based on the fact that the place is completely empty. The detective then asked Chad, "Do you have Lori's phone number?" This is strange for him to answer this way, since he is the husband of Lori Vallow. He's living with her. He's talking to her every day. And Chad responds, "No, I don't have it." So, of course, the detective finds this even more suspicious, because he knew that Chad and Lori were married prior to speaking with Chad. At this point, he plays dumb and continues to ask Chad questions. The detective asks Chad, "How do you know Lori Vallow?" And Chad responds with, "I had only met her a couple of times through Alex." At this point, Detective Hope approaches the detective and Chad talking, and they ask, "Do you have Lori Vallow's phone number?" Finally, Chad gives them the phone number to contact Lori Vallow. The detective asks Chad, "Why had you not given me the number?" And Chad says, "I felt you were accusing me of something." Strangely enough, the detective never accused Chad of anything, never even given any type of insinuation that he would be in trouble. It's at that point he breaks contact with Chad. So at this point, the detectives actually call Lieutenant Ron Ball to come to their location. He did this because of how Chad and Alex were responding and acting. They do this because they feel, based off of the lies that they tell, that something just isn't right. And 3 other detectives, including Ball, respond to the area where they are questioning Alex and Chad while trying to locate Lori Vallow. Once Ron Ball arrives on the scene, they attempt to get a hold of Lori and Unit 175, but no one answers. Next, they go to 174, where Melanie Boudreaux's unit is, and they have no luck there. This must be likely due to the fact that she is with Ian and his family, or on her way. And we'll talk about this later. She talks about the fact that she does spend the holiday of Thanksgiving with Ian's family. Many people believe there was the reasoning that she gave to the public for her going to Ian's for Thanksgiving was the fact that she was alone for Thanksgiving. Probably wasn't what was really happening until the police showed up to do the welfare check for JJ. So this is probably sudden plans for her. Speculating it. So anyways. Now I want to put this part in here so we don't forget. The next day, or that evening for the next day, detectives are instructed to obtain a search warrant. He goes to the prosecutor's office. and they prepare a warrant for November 27th. During this time, they're still trying to communicate with or call Lori Vallow, and Hope tries to call Lori with no success. He left a message on her voicemail asking her to call. Chad and Lori at this time are married nearly 3 weeks. Here is her new husband living in the townhouse with Lori where JJ and Tylee lived, and where he and his kids baked cookies after Tammy passed away. Yet he couldn't answer a basic question on JJ, and we're not certain if they even asked anything about Tylee. According to what we know at this time, detectives noticed that that really Tylee wasn't in the picture at this point. While at one moment Lori and her posse say Kay is threatening them at this point in time, and they tell police JJ is with Kay, the very same woman Lori is so afraid of. It's like a night and day relationship with Kay. Which is it really? Is she bad or is she good? Demon or angel? It just seems that Kay fits the criteria of the moment. And this seems to be in effect for every other person in Lori's life, including Charles Vallow. She will say whatever she has to do or say to make it work and what she thinks to her advantage. For some reason, she thinks detectives are dumb and that they're not going to figure anything out. Which, based on what we've learned over the past year on this case, we did see Lori getting away with quite a bit of manipulation, especially with Charles Vallow. He reached out, only to die at the end. So perhaps Lori knows what she's doing. The fact of the matter is Lori is never solid on anything she says, making her unpredictable and unreliable. Kay says she never had trouble with Lori until recently. She met Chad and things went downhill and down the stairs. So Lori is in support of JJ being with Kay is not really fitting what Lori is telling other people. So at this point, it was clear that Lori and Chad weren't expecting detectives to show up that quick or at all. And they have to change, where JJ is going and where he's been, trying to throw police off. So on November 26th, when the detectives were persistent on getting a hold of Lori Vallow, which they eventually do, in between all that, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow are calling their friend Melanie Gibb. They call at separate times, and Chad calls first. According to the affidavit, when Chad called, he told police that JJ was with Melanie Gibb. But also in the affidavit, which come later, Melanie Gibb informed the RPD she supposedly declines Chad and Lori's request, which we're going to cover now. Melanie Gibb is at her boyfriend's house, David Warwick's home in Pleasant Grove, Utah, when she received a phone call late in the morning from Chad Daybell. During this time, clearly Melanie Gibb is very close with Chad and Lori. She's in support of them for a time, to a point where she's smart enough to realize that somebody's fixing to go down, something isn't right. So, and she's not wanting to be one of the people going down. She claims at the time that she got these phone calls from Chad Daybell that she feels bad about things that happened, but it's clearly only herself she is sick about. And I think it's more out of fear that she's having these reactions where she's having this change of mind. Not that she's not wanting to be in support of Chad and Lori, but in fear for her well-being, because somebody's about to go behind bars. So the phone rings. It's Chad Daybell. She answers the phone, And she says that Chad says, "Hi, Melanie, this is Chad. The Rexburg police are going to call you. Don't pick up." The police are over at Lori's. They're inquiring about where JJ was. And in my opinion, when I hear this, I note that Chad seems confident and sure it's safe to call Melanie about this somewhat scary event, and this raises red flags for me. Then he continues, "She's going to tell the police that JJ's with you." According to the preliminary hearing in 2020, the attorney asked Melanie if she said anything in response to that, and she said her response was shock. "I could not recall if I said anything." But in interviews with East Idaho News with Nate Eaton, she stated that she asked them, "Isn't JJ with Kay?" In the interview, she seems quite confident to tell her side of the story, but I did notice during the preliminary hearing, she was a bit worried and afraid, but she just didn't seem so confident, and she avoided mentioning certain words like zombie and things like that. But later on at the preliminary hearing, she responds with that statement saying that she asked Chad if JJ was with Kay. Chad responds, "No." Melanie says, quote, "I asked him if he was nervous, and he said yes," end quote. At the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor asked, "Was anything else said?" Melanie responds with, "I can't recall." So to me, it just appeared that Melanie Gibb was avoiding talking too much. And I don't think that she couldn't remember. I think that she was just trying not to, make herself look any worse than what she does. I think she's scared and afraid that people are out to persecute her. But the fact that she was able to come to light and testify against them for the children and for Charles and for Tammy, she should feel confident enough to tell the truth. Yes, is she going to be judged a little? Most likely so, but she continues to sit on a stand and, answer very limited. It's a pretty friendly conversation that I can grasp off the interviews through East Idaho News when she's speaking with Chad the first time he calls. And he lets her know that Lori's going to call her soon. It's not long. And Lori calls Melanie Gibb. And when Lori calls, she's trying to explain to Melanie and convince Melanie that the police are working with Kay in some dark capacity. And Lori, through that conversation, just keeps repeating that over and over. And what Lori is trying to do is convince others that Kay and the police are dark and that they are against her in some unknown reason. Let's not forget that Lori had already mentioned that Satan was after her continuously. And jumping back to what her husband Charles says before he passes away, he claimed to police on video, anyone who disagrees with Lori is automatically dark. And one thing we do know also in that video is Charles mentions that Lori does have a gun. So what's important for me to clear this up is that Melanie seems to get everything that Lori is saying. She understands it because she never asked Lori, what does this mean and why? So about an hour or two later, after speaking with Chad, Melanie Gibb says Lori calls. So on the witness stand, Melanie Gibb immediately starts to put words into Lori's mouth. She says that when she answers the phone, Lori says, "Hi, Melanie, this is Lori." And then she says, "Wait a minute, she probably didn't say her name." She says that Lori seems upbeat and cheery. And she says, quote, "I wanted you to know everything was fine," end quote. Melanie says she's just acting like there's absolutely nothing wrong. At the preliminary hearing in 2020, the prosecutor asked her what happened after that. Melanie says, quote, "She told me that the police have been asking for JJ and that she told the police that I had JJ, that I was at the movie called Frozen. Then she asked me to just pick up my phone, take a picture, a random picture of kids running around, and that she would come by, pick him up, and then, oh, sorry. After me driving home from Utah to Arizona, that she would come and get him later that week, end quote. The prosecutor says, "Stop right there, Miss Gibb." He asked Melanie what Lori wanted her to do with the phone once more. Melanie responds, "Take a picture of random kids to make it look like it was JJ." According to Melanie, at this time when they're talking on the phone, she says Lori knew she was going down to Arizona for Thanksgiving. At the preliminary hearing, Melanie says Lori really didn't say anything else about JJ. She talked about going on vacation with Chad and his children, but didn't mention going on vacation with JJ or Tylee. The prosecutor continued to ask her a few questions, but Melanie says that she really can't recall anything else except for what they talked about Kay. So the prosecutor asked Melanie, what did Kay say? And what's interesting about this is Melanie Gibb actually recorded some of this conversation. Let me rephrase that. A conversation like this. And she recorded it later, where Lori kind of insinuates that when Melanie's asking her questions about JJ and why she told the police that JJ was with her, which we'll talk about in more detail later, Lori tells Melanie, which is interesting to me, "I have showed you this stuff basically on my computer," and Melanie seems to either reject that idea completely, or she's pretending that she's never seen anything on Lori's computer. Anyway, the continued conversation after the prosecutor asked Melanie, what did she say about Kay? Melanie says, she said that Kay was trying to kidnap JJ. And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "Well, I received emails being threatened that he was going to be kidnapped." I said, "What does she say?" Well, she sent me emails and she said, she quoted, "Well, it's not like I'm going to kidnap JJ or something." Because Melanie Gibb mentioned that she actually had a conversation with Lori Vallow back in the end of September about sending JJ to Kay, a lot of people feel that Melanie Gibb was supporting this kind of action because she was a supporter of JJ being a zombie. Lori Vallow would not address something this serious unless somebody had some kind of involvement or input. So the public following this story believe that she only shares what she wants people to know. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of us might be hard on her simply because we just don't understand how she could follow any of this in the first place. When Melanie Gibb hangs up the phone from Lori after both phone calls with Chad and Lori, Melanie says she felt this horrible feeling. She felt in shock, and she was not okay with it because she later on tells police something that isn't true. And she claims that she had no knowledge of Lori and wanting to pin JJ on being with her, which a lot of people believe might be a lie. But something does get to Melanie Gibb, and her gut feeling tells her that she needs to do the right thing. But when police first talk to her, she doesn't tell them the truth. She doesn't even answer the phone at first. Melanie Gibb gives a reason as to why she doesn't speak to the police, and it's because Chad told her not to answer the phone. But if you have a gut feeling, I don't think that would be the right thing, or that's the thing that's telling her what to do. She's a grown woman and intelligent enough to know right from wrong, but she's struggling with right and wrong. So again, she goes against her gut feeling, ignores the Rexburg police. And that whole day, she's going through her mind, trying to figure out what to believe. She's trying to figure out if JJ is really in trouble or not. And during this time, she states that she's confused. For some reason, I have to question Melanie. Does she believe that the police are there to harm JJ? And would the police help Kay kidnap JJ? That's common sense. So late that evening, she spoke with Detective Ryan Pillar. And Pillar called Melanie. This is after Pillar called Melanie. Sorry, guys, excuse me. And left a message. They talk about the whereabouts of JJ. And they talk about the interest. So everything is focused on JJ. And what I think about is how Chad and Lori were having this affair behind Tammy's back, and how they got married in the temple. All of these dark teachings of zombies and these strange things happening. But Melanie continued to be supportive of the two and understands that this is not a good thing to do, but does it anyway. And I want to say, so that it don't look like I'm just bashing her, I'm just kind of telling you what she's probably going through and what people are thinking. These are based off of comments and all sort of things. So it's not long after this, she talks to David Warwick, her boyfriend, and I'm hearing, now this is a rumor, I don't know if this is fact or not, but it's because of him that she really starts to understand that maybe her friends are not so light. Comparing the interview through East Idaho News with Melanie Gibb versus the preliminary hearing, it's hard to know what the truth is, because she even had different statements and ideas of what went down November 26th on. But in an interview, Melanie says that her heart sank as soon as she found out that JJ was not with Kay any longer. And Melanie is putting these pieces together inside her head. She doesn't want to believe the worst, like I mentioned, or think Lori, a close friend, could ever do something that evil, she says. Now, at an unknown date, after all this happens, Melanie Gibb reaches out to Alex. She actually said that she wanted to meet up with him. Instead, she talks with him on the phone. According to Melanie Gibb, this happens after she arrives in Arizona from her Thanksgiving trip with her boyfriend at his house. She doesn't seem to really understand just how dangerous Alex Cox is. So, Melanie talks to Alex and tells him what is happening. And Alex says, quote, "I can't believe she threw you under the bus like that," end quote. Melanie says, "I can't believe she did either. I just can't believe she said that either. That was not smart." Now, guys, I've been busy, so I've not been able to focus on my timeline as detailed as I usually do it. But remember when I mentioned that Lori said that she was going on a vacation with Chad and his kids? I'm not certain if it comes from this conversation with Alex or the early conversation with Lori. So back to the 26th. The police did try to get contact with Melanie Gibb several times before they finally made contact with her. And then throughout that day, they also tried to get a hold of Lori Vallow. And Lori Vallow actually gave them information about JJ's whereabouts, allegedly. And they tell police and investigators that JJ was with Melanie Gibb at Frozen 2. Now, this has a lot more to it, but I haven't had time to really put the 26th into complete order because there's a lot more that actually happens that day. On November 27th, the very next day, police have obtained a search warrant And during this period of time, Melanie supposedly is on her way or there with Ian and his family for Thanksgiving. According to Melanie, she had told her new boyfriend, Ian Powaski, that she didn't have anybody to spend Thanksgiving with. This is important for what you'll hear about soon in this case. When detectives arrive to Lori's apartment, they discover that Lori's no longer there. In fact, there is nobody there. It's during this time that Ian says that Chad Daybell tells him that he's heading to Hawaii, or at least he's heading out of, Idaho soon, and that he can contact Chad through his portal. Let's say, allegedly, this is what's said to Ian Powaski. Melanie makes the drive down to Ian and his family. And at some point, she mentions that she goes by herself. And then at another point, she says she's in the car with Ian's children. And one of Ian's children tell their father that to not mess this one up, Dad, referring to Melanie. At some point during this time, Melanie Boudreaux claims that she gets a text. And that text is coming from police, and they tell her that someone had broken into her home. According to Melanie Boudreaux, she told the investigators, after pausing a bit before replying, that she was with people that she loved, and of course anything that was missing really didn't matter as much as being with them. So the police had finally gotten a warrant, and it turns out that Melanie's place wasn't broken into, but they had a warrant to search her unit. They also searched Lori Vallow's unit, as well as her brother Alex Cox. Detectives say when they show up the Pioneer Road, the condo complex, and attempt to serve a search warrant, they find out that Lori Vallow and her new husband were gone. The detective says, "It appeared to me that most of the clothing in Lori's apartment had been removed. Other furniture was still inside the residence." And RPD believed that she had left Rexburg with Chad Daybell the night of November 26, 2019. So investigators get into Lori Vallow's unit, which is 175, and inside they search for any signs of the children, at least JJ. Inside, they find a half-empty bottle of Rexburg, which belongs to JJ, which is used to treat his autism and ADHD. They also find a suitcase with his name on it. In one breath, they claim that the apartments appeared to be lived in because there was food, furniture, and other items that suggest it might be a living home. They said, except for one thing. The closets and dresser drawers were all empty. There was no clothes. At some point during this search, they discover the rental agreement that Lori Vallow had for her storage unit. And it is a self-storage unit 652. Police say that they obtained a warrant to search that unit, and they do. Inside that unit, they ended up finding several items, and most of it belonging to both JJ and Tylee, the children of Lori Vallow. Inside were skates, bikes, family albums, and a bag with JJ's initials. But during the search on the 27th, their attempt on the 26th to find JJ, investigators found no sign that JJ was around. What had me wonder is, since they said inside that unit they found winter clothes, they didn't say if they found any other clothes. So that would make me think that perhaps, maybe, Lori gave away clothes or sent them to the dump, and I don't know if they've ever searched that. But anyways, next, they continue to search her JJ. They obtain cell phone data and talk with other witnesses, people such as family, neighbors, and friends. And Melanie returns from her Thanksgiving vacation with her boyfriend, Ian Powaski, and she says she gets in contact immediately with the police. Okay, guys, we're going to have to pause on Thanksgiving Day because I'm into an hour and 20 minutes on this now, and you know that's really pushing my phone. So, guys, this story is it's a mess, and it's got loads of information, and I'm missing tons of information that I could put in here, and I had to decide to choose certain information to put into this video so that we're able to at least complete any, the parts that we're getting out there. I mean, it's just too massive to be able to complete it all. It would take forever. So right now, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close it out here. Don't forget to check out. We have these people missing right now. And share their faces, share their information. And I'll see you guys soon. Love you.